Another week, another wild college football week. You
I'm
there,
just looking
sir?
at. I'm looking at something.
Oh,
Just the NFL. I mean, they're blaming Nick Chubb for running in a touchdown late in the game. He could have gone out of bounds.
on losing to the Jets?
Yeah, but they gave up 14 points in under 2 minutes on defense, and they're blaming Nick Chubb because he should have run out of bounds.
They played cover two with and all the Z receiver did is run straight down the field and Joe Flacco just threw it to him. They played cover two. Why
Yep.
did why didn't they play cover four and drop all four guys? And who cares if they catch 10-yard outs all the way down the field? By the time they would have scored, it was so stupid.
Well, and then
Anyway,
sometimes
the
if you
Jets.
do that, if you keep it in front of you, I mean, honestly, the scariest part about football is to play defense the entire way that you've been playing it the whole game and not change anything. If you've been aggressive and blitzing and all that stuff, I mean, it's been working. It's so funny to see teams struggle on offense all game long. And then in the fourth quarter, the defense gets a little bit lax. They change their scheme. And then all of a sudden, with an up tempo, you're moving down the field with no problem. I don't know.
Yesterday's NFL was crazy. Kyler Murray scoring at the end.
Yeah, I saw that.
Controversy with they called the penalty on them. All of a sudden they got an extra set of 4 downs from the 5. There's no way they're stopping him with 4 downs from the 5.
And Renfro freaking fumbles 2 plays in a row.
2 in a row. That was shocking too.
Mm-hmm.
He just caught the right. The second one was a big hit on the ball.
The first one was a slap from behind. So, but still, I mean, that's why you see kids in college carry footballs. Running backs carry footballs to class.
Yeah,
you got to keep it high and tight and never let it go. And ball security is important. So, but anyways, that's the NFL. I just saw that. It's just I follow the NFL. I like it. College football is a little bit different to me. I think the talent in the NFL is much better from a clean perspective, and then you could sit there and watch a clunky Texas A&M Miami game, where it's just ugly football, and realize that maybe 15% of these guys are potential NFL players. But I'd rather watch college football, I guess.
Oh yeah, well the fan base, all the things that can happen. By the way, Notre Dame. Did you see that they got their first win? And I didn't think it was very impressive. And the whole controversy was Tommy Rees's screaming at Pine, right? Pine was the guy who took over for Buckner.
Yep.
For Pine, screaming and yelling at him from the booth. By the way, I don't know how impactful that is from the booth. It's like when somebody yells at me on the phone, I just hold the phone out that way.
Yeah.
Away from here, I keep yelling. Are you done?
I don't know. Yeah, they didn't look good. I know a friend of mine took the money line, which was very bad odds. You just assume they're going to win, and you bet $1,100 to win like $200. And that was a game that people had to sweat out for a while. I mean, they just don't look polished. They don't look good on offense. They don't really have playmakers.
Cal's not good. I watched most of that game. Cal is not good.
No, they're a defensive team. Very, very.
They are defensive,
conservative.
Yeah.
They're going to make you, go 12 plays to score and hope you make a mistake. And offensively, they're very vanilla, and they're not a good football team. But they gave him trouble, and had he lost that one, that would have been a little bit of a problem. But he didn't, and Jimbo didn't. So now we can stop talking about Marcus Freeman and Jimbo Fisher, and Brian Kelly won a big game against Mississippi State. And now we can start talking about the guys like Carl Durrell at Colorado and Jeff Collins and at Georgia Tech and Brian Harsin at Auburn. And those guys are up next to be fired. So every week it's going to change. This is the thing about it. The narrative Jimbo Fisher beat Miami. Miami did not look good. It was a home game. They should have won. And now he's not being talked about as on the hot seat by a lot of people because it's hard to talk after a win. I remember I wrote an article about Scott Frost being gone after they beat North Dakota, and people were upset about it. They said, "Wait, why are you writing this? You just won." And I'm like, well, he beat North Dakota. It wasn't impressive, and he's gone. He's just gone. Jimbo is on the hot seat, but people won't write as much about that this week as they beat a Miami team that didn't look good.
Yeah, Miami's gonna have a ways to go. I thought the and before I go into it, go to myfootballcamps.com/D1, the promos. Listen, we're at a point where we have quite a few things that we're doing with these promos that if you want us to do the promos and really help you, the spaces are getting limited. I mean, it really is. Time will get stretched, and we just, if you want to get in, this is the time now to do it, because you wait to the end of the season when recruiting goes through the roof in November, when guys start visiting campuses, we might be completely full.
Yeah, I think we got over 100 clients or something like that. And I was talking to a few other people that were interested in this week. I know you talked to one of them, and as a kid who broke his collarbone 3 games into the season, and he's a 2024, and he's going to wait till next season. And I didn't do a hard sale or anything. I said, no, now is probably when you need it more than anything. I mean, right. You got 3 games of film, and you got your sophomore stuff, and missing most of your junior season can be disastrous if your name isn't out there, because you disappear. It's almost like you just become non-existent. You just disappear off the face of the earth, and then you may resurface as a senior and have a great 3 games, and then it's too late. So you got to stay on the radar, even if you're injured, or even if your team's not throwing you to football or whatever. It's just, that's the way it is. Promo is better than no promo, and it's the only way you're going to stay noticed.
Yeah, you can learn lessons as players from what the college coaches do, because I'll tell you this, they promote themselves right into each job, and then don't do too much once they get there. Some of these guys, the guys who are putting in, you can answer this. Tell me what you think, because you're definitely much more like, I know all these guys, but in a different capacity. I know them in a coach to coach capacity. And here's what I find interesting. They put in all this work when they're young, rise to the top, maybe even as a head coach, some success. But once they get to the money area, they stop working quite as hard. Is that I wonder, is that a cash out in some of these instances, or is this an example of people who worked up from the bottom, who probably didn't have a ton of money growing up in a lot of cases, and that this is like, hey man, like, it's kind of hard to think about when you're sitting on $10 million, like getting up and going to work when you came from nothing and all of a sudden you basically made it, right? So what is it?
See, I don't think money comes into play for any of these guys because of their personalities. It's just who they are. I think the money is important. Obviously, they're making life decisions based on finances, but I think they're all such good, football coaches to the core, whether they were GAs, and obviously most of them played. They've reached the pinnacle, the highest level. I mean, you could give examples of guys, Brent Venables is in his first head coaching gig, and he's at Oklahoma where he kind of made his name. Ryan Day is the head coach of Ohio State. He was a GA at BC in Florida. I think they make it, and I think the money doesn't play a factor. I think what plays a factor is that the way they're pulled in so many different directions, that they don't know how to handle that. Being a small-time coach, like Billy Napier's responsibilities at Louisiana are, 1/100th of what he has at Florida, and he has to juggle all that stuff. And that's just more to manage. And you become more of a CEO and delegate, But once you delegate more, you better have really good, right-hand men. So I don't think the money comes into play as much as it's the job becomes too much. I
Yeah.
think, Herm Edwards was an NFL coach, so he kind of understands it. And I don't think that job became too much. He delegated very well. But for a guy like Scott Frost, the difference between being a coordinator at Oregon, being the head coach at UCF, and then being, the head coach at Nebraska, where he played, where everybody's pulling him in 85 directions, is just sometimes it's too much.
That's interesting. And I think I like what you said about their right hand man. I think that's an undervalued part about the guys that are successful, radically successful versus not, like how good their right hand guy was. Like Dabo, let's look at
Yeah.
how Dabo was when he had Venables, right? He had a right hand man. Now, obviously, Venables moved on, but having Venables as his right hand man was so like they were at a different level when they had them. Not just from a coaching standpoint, but having that other person, I guess, that you can trust that basically is at your level, that is probably isn't trying to take your job per se, you know. Um, I think that's a really interesting point that the
It's
guys
hard.
who
It's hard.
lose that once you lose and once you have it, you lose it. What do you do, right?
How often is Bud Foster was at Virginia Tech forever? How often does that happen? Venables was at Clemson forever. Now you look at Jim Harbaugh, he almost left. Both of his coordinators left, and this is following a playoff season. So now he's got, a different offensive system to some extent, a different defensive scheme to some extent. And guess what? The guy before him on defense replaced Don Brown, who he had to fire. I mean, you have so many different personnel changes. There's really not anybody that you can rely upon on a coaching standpoint. Kentucky's very lucky. Mark Stoops has Vince Marrow. Vince Marrow hasn't gone anywhere, and he is the heart and soul of that assistant staff. He's the heart and soul of recruiting. But once he moves on, which he eventually will, then they could suffer a little bit. Jim Knowles leaves Oklahoma State, and all of a sudden the defense doesn't look as good. The changeover in coaching, the head coach can only do so much. And if you have different guys with different philosophies and different ways of handling pressure and stress as your right-hand guys, that's why personnel guys are so important, and they don't get a lot of credit. If you've got a personnel guy, Pantoni at Ohio State is a good example. He was there with Urban at Florida. He moved to Ohio State with Urban. Now he's with Day at Ohio State. Organizationally, everything is the same. And that's something that the coach can rely upon, and he can focus on the 85 other aspects he has to deal with.
Very, very interesting. And Herm Edwards, so Arizona State, when they hired Herm, I mean, it looked like it could go in a positive direction, and then the roof fell in with all the different things, obviously ultimately leading to his firing, so demise. And what is it there that just fell apart?
Yeah. So Herm was an NFL guy who hadn't coached in a very, very long time, but had never coached at the college level as a head football coach. And you remember Lovie Smith was hired in the same sort of capacity right around the same time. And these were two like head scratching hires. Lovie Smith had been head coach of the Bears for 11 years, and then Tampa Bay. And Herm was Jets and Chiefs. And they just didn't know how to recruit. They didn't know how to handle all the aspects of things. And then you throw in NIL and the transfer portal. So you got Herm, who's got Antonio Pierce was his right-hand man, from the Giants, great high school football coach out west, recruiting very, very well in the state of California. And then he gets dinged because of the COVID violations where they were having visits on campus during a dead period during COVID. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to crumble, the infrastructure. You start losing players to the portal. You're not effectively recruiting the portal properly. Recruiting is dipped. Arizona State's last in the Pac-12 in recruiting this year. They were last in the Pac-12 recruiting last year. You can lose one guy. If you're a CEO type, which is what Herm is, which is what Lovie Smith was, your infrastructure falls below you, and you have no chance because you can't do it yourself.
Right.
Lovey was 3-9, 2-10, 4-8, 6-7, and then got fired COVID year. Herm started off okay, and then the last couple of years have been just not very good. And losing Jaden Daniels and the Lowell kid, the defensive tackle that went to Louisville, Pearsall, Gentry, the linebacker, went to USC. On and on. It just continues to show that unless you're handling everything yourself or you have great staff, things are going to fall apart and fall apart fast. So that's what happened there. I thought it was a horrible hire. And and you could say that about anybody. This is the thing about college football. Okay, so you could go back and look at Mark Richt, and you could say when Mark Richt was hired at Georgia, a horrible hire. The guy lasted forever, and he didn't really win to the level Georgia wanted to win. And then he gets fired eventually, and you could say, beat your chest and say, I told you, horrible hire. You could say that about almost anybody, short of Saban, short of Dabo, short of a Kirk Ferentz, short of Kirby Smart. But everybody's eventually going to wear out their welcome.
Right.
And Herm started off okay, better than expected. But they validated his hire by saying he worked with the Under Armour kids for a decade. And I was down there. He worked with them for a week, very limited week. And they're all, all-star players having fun. It wasn't like coaching. So he had he thought he knew recruiting because he was dealing with these guys. But he really wasn't dealing with the real world, and it just caught up to him. I think that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I figured that's why they hired him, thinking the NFL connection, and then he did work with the Under Armour kids, but it's not like those All-Star games. Like that's a fun week. I mean, yes, they're competing and all that stuff, but that's a fun week for them, and that's a feel-good week. You're not really riding a kid. You're not, seeing the dark side of anything with respect to recruiting, with respect to play. Because basically, if you win, great. If you don't win, who cares? I mean, it was an all-star game, right?
Right.
Having fun. You're looking to have a good time. Carl Durrell. Now, Carl Durrell, you said that's Colorado, right?
Yeah, they're 0-3.
Yep.
He started off with 4 wins in COVID. So Mel Tucker left them to go to Michigan State. They hired Carl Durrell, who hadn't been a head coach since 2007. Really odd hire. Started off 4-0. Now he's 4-13 since. They're 0-3. They just got blasted by Minnesota. They've been blasted by TCU and Air Force. The program is one of the worst Power 5 programs in college football now. And now he's on the hot seat because, his athletic director just came out and said how disappointing things are. And he's talking to the fan base and telling them, we know how disappointing. When that happens, when they come out and say that stuff, you're done. So he's going to be next. Jeff Collins just lost 42-0 to Ole Miss. Things aren't working at Georgia Tech. He's won 3 games, I think, his first 3 years, and this is year 4. Harsin, they wanted him out from the beginning, and now a loss to Penn State, a blowout loss to Penn State, just gives them another excuse to boosters to try to get rid of him. So all these guys are going to be gone. In last year, there was unprecedented college football coaching movement. There were so many big jobs being opened. If you look at the first-year head coaches this year, I mean, you just – look at every program almost, and it's a new coach. We're going to have double digits this year too, and it just starts to show. Mike Norvell coming into the season was on the hot seat. I thought he was going to struggle this year. I thought they were going to struggle to win 6 games, and he would be gone. Now he's 3-0. They might throw an extension at him. That's how quickly things can change in college football, and it's overreaction city. But if your team is so bad, where you're getting drilled by Minnesota 49-7, and you just have no competitive balance or nature about you, or your Arizona State losing to Eastern Michigan by almost 10 points, you have to make the change at that point in time. But there's no more patience anymore, and I get that. And it's just going to lead to more 3 jobs, 3 years and out, and nobody given a chance. And part of me doesn't feel that's the right fit, but part of me feels that is the way you got to be in this day and age.
Well, I guess with the transfer portal too, you can get some immediate help. And I looked at like Miss UConn, how terrible is that program? I thought maybe something would have go forward with my alma mater, with Mora, but it's just a bunch of fluff again. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's just a bunch of fluff, and that's all. That's all it looks like to me. And 59-0.
They suck. I mean, they just don't have any players. And Randy Edsel ran a program into the ground. They couldn't
Yes.
find a conference. They're not even in the AAC. They're an independent. Football should be the plug should be pulled. I live in Connecticut. These guys are making. Edsel was making $1 million a year. There was questions about his son being hired and how much money he's making. Rentschler Field costs millions and millions of dollars. The practice facility up there costs a ton, and they're just sucking up state money for a team that's not competitive and horrible. They hung with Utah State, and now we're learning very quickly that
Utah State's not good.
State, they're horrible. I mean,
They're horrible.
They are horrible. They beat UConn, then they lost to Alabama 55-0. Then they just lost to Weber State, which is an FCS program, 35-7. It's not like it was an upset where you lose by 2 points or something. They got drilled. So now we know Utah State is awful, horrible, and that UConn stayed within 11 of them. But if they were any good, they would have lost that by 50 points. There's no hope for UConn. I'm sorry, it's just over. It was a nice little run. They got lucky that the basketball program won 3 national titles. I mean, you've lived in stores. There's nothing there, and there's no recruiting landscape in Connecticut, and so they were lucky to win 3 national titles there. And they're lucky to even have a FBS program, but they're on the way to financial ruin, honestly, because
really.
Yeah, I mean, if they go 1-11 this year.
No, you're right, because UConn got. I mean, you could argue they made great high. Well, the one AD they had was unbelievable, and Lou Perkins did a fantastic job, and that's where one person was able to do a great job. He hired Jim Calhoun. He had Jim Calhoun. He had Gino Ariema, and then his hiring of Skip Holtz and Randy Edsel the first time. Those were all good moves, But once he left, dude. There was it took a little time. But it was forget it.
Well, they're going to lose to everybody. Maybe not UMass. UMass is really, really bad too. But everybody left on their schedule, they're going to get drilled by. So best season's 1-11, maybe 2-10, and then you just keep plodding forward as an independent. It's not going to work. Hey, I need you to vamp for 4 minutes. I got to go do something real quick. Hold on.
You got it.
You talk.
I'll definitely talk. So this would be a good chance to talk about a couple of the guys that we're working with that are just doing unbelievable things. So Chase Enlow just rushed for 138 yards. Just had 138 all-purpose yards again, just tearing it up. His brother's doing an excellent job with the Hun. The Hun is undefeated in New Jersey. Carson Ronner is tearing up. Every single week, the opponents over at Elkhorn, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We posted the amazing clip of Carson Kruger, which is just unbelievable, of him throwing the ball, almost getting his head tear off, and delivering the football. Those are just a few examples. Colin Skeen, all these guys are really putting themselves in great position. Ben Hartman. To be able to be recruited. Some of them are getting offers. Parker Meese already has 20 offers, and it's just a multitude of guys. If you go to myfootballcamps.com/D1, it's an opportunity to really get exposure because of the fact that you have myself and Mike Farrell working with you. You have 1.5 million followers and viewers directly to the coaches.
I'm back.
Check it out. Good,
my
perfect.
dog,
I did
my dog was eating something he shouldn't be eating.
So. I wanted to ask you: is there what schools have hope that are on like I know some of these big South schools have, right? have hope to continue to thrive in this kind of new era, right? And then because the you can really see, like, to me, I don't know, I see the difference in these Power Five schools and everybody else, especially the powerhouse SEC schools. You know, you could go down the line. I mean, Kentucky, Mississippi, even Mississippi State. You know, Florida, the next tier is above so many of these other programs. Um, is there any groups that are going to have a chance to be successful that if they're not in the um, the big conferences?
Yeah. Obviously you got Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and BYU, and BYU is an independent, but the other three moving from the AAC to the Big 12. So you wonder about conference expansion. Is it going to be limited? Are we going to get down to 40 teams, instead of 53 with the TV deals? Are you going to have the Big 10 as the North and the SEC as the South, and they're going to swallow everybody up? Or are you going to have continued Power Five expansion is going to stay Power Five, or is there going to be a sixth conference, which is made up of the best group of 5 teams right now? So when you look at those teams, the ones on the cusp that haven't, committed to move yet, you think of Appalachian State, you think of Coastal Carolina, you think of, well, prior to their struggles recently, South Florida, because of their geographical location. They almost beat Florida this week, but they're not a very good team or a very good program at this point in time. Memphis, over the last many years, maybe you think of them. But yeah, there's an opportunity for some programs. I think UTSA is very good. I think Troy is a pretty good football team, and now both of those teams are coming off losses, but they're competitive teams. There are some small teams. Now, I love the group of 5 simply because nobody knows about them, and it gives me an opportunity to sort of be an expert. When I talk about App State, and I can talk about, everybody knows Chase Bryce because he was at Clemson, but they've got a running back duo that is, excellent. Peoples, I think he had over 100 yards this past season. Cameron Peoples, he's got 261 this season. Nate Noel, having an off year for him, is a really good player. But ranking the group of 5 guys, there's a real cult following for group of 5 football. And for these smaller schools, App State will not be a site that you pop up on one of these big networks and get 1,000 subscribers. But if you service that market as a website or as a social media guy, you'll gain a lot of followers. And that's the fan base fever, I think, that some of these schools have that could move them up into a higher level. The sleeping giants are Houston and UCF. When you're talking about programs moving up, people say, well, why not Cincinnati? They made the playoff. It's different. They're recruiting Ohio, which is great. Houston's recruiting the state of Texas, and it's very crowded. And they've also got the billion dollar buyer guy. What's his name? Fertitta. You heard of him?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, he's worth more money than God, and he throws so much money into that football program. It's like T. Boone Pickens at Oklahoma State. He's going to keep feeding that program. And then UCF has such a large student base, such a large fan base, and such a great recruiting area that they could break through as well. So those are the 2 that I kind of see as the most dangerous. You think of SMU as another program that's not headed to the Power 5, but is kind of sneaky scary.
Yeah, good.
So there are programs like that, and I like talking about them, but people want to talk about, and anybody who's tuning into this or anybody who watches this on a replay, they're going to want to know what we think about Anthony Richardson. They're going to want to know what we think about Texas A&M beating Miami. They're going to want to know what we think about, obviously Notre Dame, we talked about at the top, their struggles. And then we're going to want to know about coaches that are about to be fired. It's just, that's what people want to hear, but there's a small group of rabid fans out there that want to hear everything possible about Coastal Carolina or App State. And I just don't think that market's been tapped yet from college football or from, the media.
Speaking of the big schools, there was one player this weekend that did stuff that, and maybe I'm going to talk about, who was just, I mean, to me, if he comes when he comes out this year, I'm assuming he will. Well, no, he may have to. I don't know if he has to wait or not another year. The tight end from Georgia, Bowers,
Yeah, he's got to wait another year.
wait another year.
Yeah.
He is out of this world. What he does, I mean, it's a gigantic receiver running around out there. Even though he's a tight end, right? But he moves like just an absolute gigantic receiver. It's incredible. He's so dominating at such a. I mean, he's dominated last year from the second he came in, right? Have you seen a tight end like this before that could do all the different things that he can do?
Well, it's funny because you got one on his roster who could do the same thing. He just has had a lot of off-field issues, and that's Eric Gilbert. When we saw what Eric Gilbert did at LSU his freshman year, it was similar, and he's similar size. 6'4", 230 pounds, very, very fast, wide receiver skills. When Gilbert actually went into the portal, he was supposed to end up at Florida, and then academically things fell apart there. Georgia recruited him as a wide receiver. Now, he hasn't, to my knowledge, gotten on the stat sheet with any catches or anything like that. And he's got well-known, off-field issues, including some mental health stuff there, but equally talented. And the funny part about Georgia is Bowers is their number one tight end. You could argue he's a wide receiver. Darnell Washington is a freak. He's a 275-pound freaky athlete. He's the one who hurdled the dude, I think it was a couple weeks ago. And he's amazing, like built like LeBron. And then they got Oscar Delp, who's a true freshman who had a touchdown this past weekend as well. 6'5", 225, who's going to be not as good as Bowers, but equally good. And just 3 years ago, this was a team, Georgia, that was being completely criticized for never using the tight end. I mean, they had Isaac Nada there, who was a 5-star, never really got targeted. Before him, they had a kid from up in Massachusetts, Arthur, what was his name? Artie the Party, I called him because he was a party maniac. They had talented guys, 4-star, 5-star tight ends, never used them. Now, all of a sudden, if you're a tight end, Georgia's where you want to go. And the only thing you're worried about is that they've got too many tight ends and they're too talented at that position. And that's how quickly things can change. Mayer is up there. He's the number one tight end for, out of Notre Dame coming out for this draft, but Bowers has to wait another year. He's only a sophomore, and he'll be a top 10 pick when it's his turn if he keeps developing.
Yeah, the tight end position, how the people who utilize it the right way, I mean, it's become so effective. It's such a mismatch on either side for the defense. It's surprising that more people don't utilize them because in the NFL game, they're being used all over the place. I mean, you look at Mark Andrews, you look at obviously Gronk was used a ton when he was there. You got Kittle. What's the other guy?
Kelsey, obviously, at Kansas City.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, go right down the line. Like that's an area now that you can really make some big money. And if you're good and you become a pro, like it's not like you're getting unseated from your position for, if you could stay healthy, you could play 10, 12 years easy as a tight end.
Yeah. And it used to be, those guys were rare, way back when the Ozzie Newsomes of the world were very rare. And then you had the basketball guys like Tony Gonzalez and what's his name, Gordon, with the Chargers. They came in and showed what athleticism could do at that particular position. And then it's kind of morphed now into that being more of a flex. You've got your inline guys like Jason Witten who have tremendous success. They could block. They could do everything. They usually go down, post up, move the chains. But nowadays you get these flex freaky guys who are just great athletes that are just mismatches. You can't You can't put D-backs on them because they're too big and they can outrun linebackers. So Andrews last year had a tremendous season. He's off to an okay start. I mean, he's got 14 catches already. But Kelsey, Gronk, those type of guys have been not only difference makers, but Super Bowl difference makers. And you can argue the same thing with Kittle. And then you've got the wide receivers that are, big, like Mike Evans. He could be a tight end.
Yeah.
Freaking Drake London, the kid at Atlanta, he could be a tight end. It's always good to have a good combination of a speedy receiver, a Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs type, and then have a really reliable big receiver or tight end, because it messes your defense up so much. If you drag the slot guy across, tight end's available, for the post, because he's going to get single coverage on a safety. He's just too big. Or if you go four wides, then you got a linebacker trying to cover a freaking tight end, and he's too slow. So, I mean, yeah, Brock Bowers is special. They're hard to find in college, though. They're not like a billion of them.
Right.
And that's why it's so fascinating to me that Georgia has 4 of them, who, to me, Delp is still yet to emerge. But I had 3 of the top 11 tight ends in all of college football on the Georgia roster. That's just ridiculous. And that's why they're number one. Is one of the reasons why they're number one. You have trouble matching up against them.
Yeah, it's incredible the way the tight end game has evolved. I think back to Kellen Winslow Sr.,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kellen Winslow Sr. really was kind of the first flex tight end guy back for the Chargers back during that era when they had
Eric Coryell. Yeah.
They used him all the time, flexed him out and stuff, and he was really the first guy to do a lot of that flexing stuff. And now it's the norm. It's interesting how that's really evolved the game. I keep thinking about the Notre Dame Tommy Rees thing, and because it's funny because I've read a lot of reaction on it, and people have two distinct reactions. Like, one is that's not very Notre Dame like, right? And number 2, is that the best way to get the most out of your quarterback, especially since he's a backup, right? And he's kind of trying to figure it out quickly, which he did for the most part. Not a great team they're playing against, but for the most part,
I'm watching it right now, and people make such a big deal out of everything. It's just so ridiculous. Like, not Notre Dame like. Well, how about winning? Winning's Notre Dame like, and if your quarterback's screwing up, and if he sucks, they got upset at Brian Kelly with his red-faced tantrums and stuff like that, but he won, so let him win. Tommy Rees's offense is under fire. They stink, and that's why people are making a big deal out of it. But Shane Beamer got caught in the crosshairs this week too. I don't know if you saw that. But, so the one thing you can never obviously play with in college football, there's 2 things. Racial inequality and Title IX. Those 2 things ever.
Right.
So and he doesn't even know they're doing a Title IX celebration with a bunch of female athletes on the field after the first quarter, and he gets caught on camera yelling for them to get off the freaking field. And then it turns into a big deal. It's like, oh my God, Shane Beamer hates, Title IX, and he doesn't care about female athletes and all this other stuff. And I'm like, his explanation, he apologized. His explanation was, I didn't know what they were doing. No one told me. And, I was trying to learn to play. And there were people on the field when we were trying to do that. He goes, he's got 2 daughters who play sports. He shows up at all these different, female sporting events in South Carolina. And the outcry of the public is, oh, he doesn't care. He's a self-centered jerk who hates Title IX. That's the thing, is like, things don't go from like disagreement. They go straight to hate. Oh, Tommy Rees hates Drew Pine. Oh, Shane Beamer hates Title IX. Like, how do you go from?
What does it have to do with Title IX? The fact that is that what they were honoring? Or
yeah,
something?
they were honoring Title IX, and they had a large group of female athletes there, and it was between the first and second quarter, and he didn't know. Like, this is the other thing about a head coach, right? He's going into a home game against Georgia, the number one team in the country. He's doing all this preparation. Plus, he's also, glad handing every booster group. He's doing this, that, and the other to make sure that everything's going right when it comes to ticket sales, to the cockabooses, to the sidelines, to the game plan, to his coaches, to recruiting. Hosting a ton of recruits, and he doesn't know or didn't remember that in between the first and second quarter, they're doing a Title IX celebration. And why would he know? Like, that has nothing to do with his team trying to win a football game. Now, had he known, certainly he wouldn't have yelled, because it just doesn't look appropriate in these days and age to yell about Title IX or whatever. But his explanation was fine by me. And listen, I'm probably making it a bigger deal than it should be, and maybe I'm part of the problem. But I saw a lot of people out there, looking to cancel Shane Beamer because he spat on Title IX by yelling at them to get off the field. And then it goes to, he hates Title IX. He doesn't care about female athletes, blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
like, that's where it goes. It gravitates from, wow, he kind of screwed up, and maybe that was a bad look, to sheer hatred of, anything female sports related. How's that happen? It's the cancel culture. It's the overreaction world we live in. And, I wrote an article last week about this week's headlines, and it was kind of in jest, and people took it seriously, of course, but I was like, next week's headlines. Okay. And I went through some of the big games, and one of the big games was Miami and Texas A&M. And I said, here's the headline: if Miami wins, the U is back. And the Cristobal era is going to change the world, and now we're going to win national titles. And that would be the narrative. I mean, because there's so much excitement around Miami with Mario Cristobal there, and he's the best fit since Butch Davis, that if they beat Texas A&M on the road as a ranked team, they'd jump into the top 10, and they would be back. The U would be back. That would have been it. And then if Texas A&M wins, either it's Jimbo's inconsistent. How can he lose to App State one week and beat a good Miami team the next week? And for Miami, it'll be here we go again. All the excitement and everything about, Mario Cristobal. Now they can't win. It's all of its overreaction. What we saw is Miami lost a game to Texas A&M. It was an ugly game. Texas A&M still not a very good football team, and Jimbo Fisher is still an underachieving coach there. And Miami's not a very good football team, and they lack playmakers, which is really weird because Miami is always known for great wide receivers, and they have none. They're still very far away from being a good team. But, the Penn State Auburn was another one. If Auburn wins, James Franklin would be the most overrated coach ever, and there's no reason why he keeps getting extensions. We should fire him. But if he wins, it's not the focus on James Franklin being good. It's Brian Harsin has to go. It's always the negative.
It is. And
I have to gravitate to the negative, or else no one's going to read anything I say. If I write something, a positive, like if I wrote a big 1,000-word article on how James Franklin is having a great season and recruiting's going well, it get, 100 people would click on it. Now, if I wrote something that said, James Franklin just won his first game, that Penn State's played down at Auburn, but they're going to suck and lose 4 of their next 5, everybody would read it, and everybody would either agree with me or disagree with me, and everybody would call me a jerk, and that's what people want. They want the anger fueled.
Oh, I noticed that completely on your Twitter. When you say something remotely like out there, what was the thing you posted that I was like, I think it wasn't an actual, it was power rankings. That's it. The power rankings. So people don't realize that your power rankings are different than the actual rank. You're going off of their schedule, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I understood that.
And my opinion, just my opinion too, which is means nothing.
Right.
But it's schedule and my opinion. Yes.
Right. So your power rankings they were going bonkers. Oh, I couldn't stop laughing. I see a lot of your posts, but I quickly scroll through most of them. But when I saw the comments in it, I said I gotta get a couple of chuckles in. So I had to read some of these comments. It was just off the wall. Talk about mean tweets.
Yeah. So, well, that's the other thing. So I put it up. So this was what it was. People got upset. Arkansas was number 2. Okay. So I had Georgia 1, Arkansas 2. And Alabama was down to 7, and they beat Texas, but beat them by 1 point. Ohio State was down to 6. They didn't look great against Notre Dame, and we've come to find out Notre Dame sucks. So again, it's an opinion. It's for fodder. It's for discussion, absolutely. So those people that are discussing it are doing what I need them and want them to do. But the vitriol and hatred is just a little much. Telling me to die, or I'm a joker of a clown, or I should quit, or I should just give up life. And that's where it gets a little nutty. And yeah, Arkansas was 2 because of who they played. They played 2 solid teams. They won both games. Now they look like garbage this past weekend. They almost lost to Morgan State or whoever the hell it was. It's going to change. Guess what? Arkansas might not even be in the top 10 this week, but I'm going to do it again. And people are going to get so angry about it, so angry. And I guess that's what I'm looking for, because if they don't get angry, let's say everybody said good list, 6 people would click on it. No one
That's what would happen.
But I don't do it on purpose. I don't put an Arkansas at number 2 and an Ohio State at number 6 on purpose to get the click. I just give my true opinion. But I've noticed if my true opinion is not in with the norm of everybody's thinking, then that's when it's going to blow up and it's going to go nutty. But it's everything I tweet like that. And it's just, Arch Manning is off to a great start this season. He's got 11 touchdowns, no picks. He's played 2 games against 5A football teams. Now he's a 2A guy. He's having a tremendous season. Made some really, really great throws. Every weekend after he has a good game, which I knew he'd have a good senior season. Of course he's going to have a good senior season. First of all, the competition, even at the 5A level, isn't that great. But his competition overall isn't very good. And he's a good quarterback. I got him as a 4-star. Every weekend, my timeline is hammered with, you suck. How's Arch now? He's not a 3-star. You're a loser. You're an idiot, on and on. Even bleeds into the NFL. I said Tua was a horrible pick at number 5 for the Dolphins. I said it from day one, and I'm sticking to it, and I'm not going to change my mind. Tua had a good game. 6 touchdowns.
Great game.
Yeah. So my timeline's filled with people calling me just an ass. What do you think of Tua now? I'm like, he had one good game. I still think he stinks.
I'll tell you this: the coach and his offensive philosophy in the NFL does make a big difference, right? Like the way that so far this guy's handled Tua.
Yeah.
He's put him in much better situations, in my opinion.
I will agree with you, but he also gave him a weapon in a 25-mile-an-hour cheetah.
Yes.
Cheetah, right? That's a catch-and-run guy to pair with Jalen Waddle, who's a catch-and-run 22-mile-an-hour guy. And they saw this guy and his noodle left arm needed guys that he could hit and stride on slants, and they could do crazy things. And that's what they've done. The difference in this team is not Tua's development. It's Tyreek Hill. He can't be stopped when he's on. And yesterday he was on, and that was a great comeback, tremendous game. I mean, man, they were down 35-14. They scored 28 points in the fourth quarter to win that game against the Ravens. And Tua threw for 409. I think he threw for 6 touchdowns and 2 picks.
Yep.
Yeah, and guess what? He still stinks. He still stinks. I'm not going to change my mind. He still stinks. So, and when he sucks, but here's the thing. If he sucks, let's say next week they play the Bills, and let's say he goes out and throws 3 picks, and he sucks. I can't go out and tweet, I told you Tua sucks, because then people will be like, what is wrong with you? You're a horrible human being. How this guy's trying his best, but there's absolutely no winning ever. I can never do a victory lap on anything that I thought was that I got right. I've done a few. I got death threats from them, and it was dumb. I shouldn't have done it. But I can't ever say that I'm right. I can only try to fend off the wrong that people see, but it's on a weekly basis. So I also, this was very controversial. You remember the kid from UCF, the great football player, Griffith, who had one hand?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I wrote an article like 5 years ago, and this was my true opinion that if I were an NFL guy, if I were an NFL general manager, and remember the time he ran?
4-3 something. You talk.
Which was, I mean, I don't think it was fixed, but it was fake, right? I mean, we all knew that there's no way that Shaquem Griffin, okay, he ran a 4.38 at the combine, I believe.
Yes.
And you know, it was clear that everybody's watch was a little bit fast, and I don't know if something was up, and I don't think they did it on purpose because he's got one hand and he's a great story. But I just said I wouldn't draft him. I wouldn't if I were an NFL guy. I was just being honest. I wouldn't draft him because it's hard enough to play NFL football. You know, you see guys with when they break their hand and they have the club.
Yeah.
It's really hard for defensive linemen to play with a club, much less a linebacker who has to actually have ball skills and catch the football and all that stuff. I just said out loud that he shouldn't be drafted. You should have seen the level of hatred I got. It was like I was rooting for him not to be drafted. I was rooting for him to be a failure in the NFL. Now, here it is 4 years later. He's retired. He never cracked any lineup, and he was a special teams guy, and he played on 2 teams. Can I do a victory lap on that?
No, you can't.
I would be killed.
Well, yeah, you would be killed. That would be what we call cold-hearted.
And I'm not cold-hearted, and I'm not going to do a victory lap. I shouldn't have written it in the first place. But the one thing I pride myself on is my freaking opinion on things. This was a hot trending topic. This was a guy that people said after the 4.38 maybe should be drafted in the second round. I'm an NFL draft analyst, and I said I wouldn't draft him. But in this world,
your point was basically that it's not that he isn't a great story. He's an amazing story. It's that the level that the NFL, everything has to be on point at all times, and it has nothing to do with him. It has to do with that the limitation he have may be too big to overcome at the NFL level. That's really what your point was.
Right. That was my point. Let's say there's a wide receiver out there who's blind. Okay. That doesn't take away from his amazing story if he can actually catch the football and be successful at the college. But I wouldn't draft him in the NFL because, you know, you have everything at the NFL level is here. It's the highest level ever. And you can't have any, you know, sort of issues. And so he had an interception in the preseason, his first year, his rookie season. Second preseason game of his career, he has an interception. My timeline blew up. I mean, you would have thought he was inducted in the Hall of Fame, and he was Ray Lewis. And everybody called me every name in the book. And you know what? What I probably should do in all of this stuff is just not write anything and just go into a hole and stop doing everything. Because if I can't say Arkansas is the number 2 power team, in my opinion, without getting destroyed, then what can I say? I mean, how is that offensive? I could see how Shaquem Griffin might be taken as you're just a jerk.
Right.
Why would you say that when you could just not say it? And I get that. But this is power rankings. You know, should I not do those?
No, obviously you should. I find here's what's interesting. It almost goes to your point because Shaquem and Shaquille are exact twins, right?
Yeah.
And Shaquille's still in the NFL,
and he plays different position.
Does, but I'm just saying that the regular ability, minus the fact that one has a
handicap.
A handicap, right? If he wasn't so athletic, they're so athletic that even at college with his handicap, he was able to be a playmaker. But at the NFL, that handicap caused enough of a slight hindrance that the brother is still in there without the handicap. And
right.
He's not, and it has to do with that's how high the level is. That's what people don't understand. It's not. It's not that you're criticizing him. It's that the
See,
level is so high.
and we're talking about this on a podcast that not a lot of people watch, right? It isn't like what's that good? Who's the punter?
You know what they're starting to watch, by the way, when I started doing the breakouts? The clips.
Oh, okay, but who's the guy who's on College Game Day now? What the hell's his name? He's so cool. He was the kicker for the Colts.
Pat McAfee.
Okay, so this isn't Pat McAfee's podcast, right? There aren't
Right.
people listening to this. There's like hundreds of people maybe listening to this after all.
Right.
And even your tiptoeing around my horrendous.
I am.
Right. But
I am.
So in hindsight, I shouldn't have written it. But also in hindsight, I was right. I mean, he was a fourth round.
No, you were right. You
there
were
was
right.
a wasted pick. They could have picked somebody else who could have played. But again, you just can't. And that's part of the reason why I want to go full Mike Farrell, which is like full inappropriate.
I think you should. Can you handle it? Can you handle it if you go full Mike Farrell?
I could handle it, but I don't. I think, I was a big fan of Howard Stern before he became just a complete lunatic, liberal, insane person.
Insane, yep.
But forever, I loved him and respected him. Thought he was funny. That's my kind of humor. It was great. What he went through, being fired time after time and having sponsors cancel on him, and everything he did was critical. I don't have the strength to do that now. Maybe when I was younger. And Barstool Sports has made a living on that type of content. McAfee does it. He doesn't do it to an extreme level like Howard Stern. I could handle it, but I would be canceled. And I can't be canceled right now because I'm just on the upstart of starting my own thing. But I would tell you this. If I was genuine, if I was real, Clay Travis is a good example of this. Now, he's a little bit too far to the anti-woke. Like he's a little bit, he's way into what I call race baiting, but converse. Like,
that's part of his whole stick too now. It's become
and listen, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't, it's not my thing. But what he did as an independent, not giving a flying crap about what people think, and with the potential of being canceled, was very, very impressive. And now he's a multimillionaire, and Outkick, I think he sold it or something. I don't know, but he made a tremendous success for himself, and he knows how to brand himself. I'm kind of in this middle where I'm doing.
Whitlock's done that too. Whitlock's done that now.
A little to more of I think even more of an annoying extent, and to a smaller extent. Like him and Whitlock teamed up, remember?
And then they broke up. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they broke up. And I think Whitlock's a little bit more sensitive than Travis. Travis could be, I don't know what he is. He could be a sociopath for all I know, but I think he's entertaining and he's smart at what he does, and he's a master marketer.
Yes.
I'm in between right now where, outrage is over Arkansas being number 2. But I'm not ready to go full bore with my real opinions because it burns a lot of bridges too. I mean, I've already burnt bridges being independent. I will tell you, there are coaches that won't talk to me now. And the reason is twofold. The first, and they will follow what I do. That's different than talking to me. They will follow what I do because I know who follows and who watches and who consumes social media and, all the analytics behind that. But it's funny, when I was at Rivals, they had to put up with me because that was a big company and their rankings meant something. And when I'm an independent, they feel they don't. Because now, my quarterback rankings, which have Arch Manning number 8 in the country, don't mean as much unless if they're not behind a big company, that's owned by a multi-billion-dollar company, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of these guys they don't communicate with me as much as they would normally. Now, if I reached out to them, they would always answer. But I've found a little bit of thin-skinnedness in some coaches that I didn't think existed before because they always played the game. They were always like, "Hey, Mike, how you doing as a family? Everything good? Blah, blah, blah." Now it's like, why did you say that? And it's very butthurt. I'm not ready to go full like, oh my God, this coach just texted me this little whiny text about something I wrote. Can you believe this crap? It would blow up. It would go crazy. Even the power rankings thing, I had a few coaches reach out to me in a positive and negative manner about that. Just small little things like that. I could go Howard Stern, but I would be canceled. Howard Stern, you remember, started to do this in the 80s. Things were a lot more lenient in the 80s than they were in 2022. You can't do what Howard Stern does in 2022. Like, look at the whole Spotify thing and Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I mean, they tried to get rid of that guy, and they almost acquiesced and got rid of him because he was stating his opinion. So now you're not going to survive if you're that guy, and it kind of sucks because it doesn't give you any genuine. There's no one that's willing to tell you the truth in sports because they're all worried about their jobs. I mean, name a guy who's willing to tell you right now that they will curb it properly, that Jimbo Fisher is not a good fit at Texas A&M. But name a guy that's willing to tell you he's very whiny. His personality is extremely defensive. He's beyond insecure. He threw Florida State into the dumpster pretty much on purpose out of pettiness. And now he's under pressure because he's a $100 million man and he's way over his head ability-wise. And he kind of lucked into Jameis Winston. I just said all that.
That's how I look. I look at Jimbo Fisher's career, and to me, it looks like Bobby Bowden groomed him, and he became his guy. Okay, he pushed Bobby Bowden out. That's how I look at it. He pushed Bobby Bowden out, got his opportunity, helped because he was the guy in waiting, and helped push Bobby Bowden out right before he's ready. Not that he shouldn't have had to leave at some point, but pushed him out. Had Jameis Winston, which is exactly what you said. Jameis Winston was a great college quarterback. Okay. And he's still a pro. It's not like he's not a pro. He's a great college quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner, all that stuff. And rode that. And then after that, it just went back down the other direction. Bobby Bowden always found the next quarterback and won again. Found the next guy and won again.
Yeah, and when Jimbo couldn't find them, he bolted. So, I mean, he had Christian Ponder, turned out to be a first rounder, but that was a reach. He had E.J. Manuel. He was a first rounder, turned out to be a reach. Then Jameis, for those 2 years, 2 great years, national championship. Then he couldn't find his quarterback. And then he stopped recruiting his entire last year at Florida State. He stopped recruiting. I mean, that recruiting class set them back forever. Willie Taggart didn't help, but the cupboard was really, not very full, especially at the quarterback position. And then he goes to A&M. He inherits Kellen Mond. He doesn't make him any better. Zach Calzada is one of his recruited guys. He stinks. Now he's got Haynes King, one of his recruited guys. He stinks. And now you got Max Johnson, who's a transfer guy, and he's average. So Connor Wegman is probably the biggest recruiting battle that Jimbo's won at Texas A&M at quarterback. He's a true freshman. We'll see if he develops. If he doesn't, then this whole quarterback whisperer that came from Jamarcus Russell at LSU to Ponder to E.J. Manuel to Jameis Winston, I think it goes away. I think people realize that this guy doesn't develop quarterbacks. And then most of the ones he put in 2 guys that were number 1 overall picks. One of them, arguably the biggest bust in NFL history, in Jamarcus Russell, and the other one, an extreme bust, even though he's still playing, in Jameis Winston. Never panned out to what people expected him to. So, but nobody's going to write all that stuff about Jimbo. Why? Because they need to talk to Jimbo, and they don't want their phone calls to Texas A&M or any inside recruiting information or anything like that, jeopardized by being truthful. What they can do is they could tippy-toe around and say, yeah, he hasn't had a great career at Texas A&M. He went 9-1 in COVID. They just missed the playoffs. Yeah, he's beaten Bama, but they've kind of underachieved. You'll see that type of stuff, and you'll see it from me. What I just said on the podcast, I'm not going to write because there's no upside to writing it. I mean, it's the truth, but it's really something that do you want to stir up that hornet's nest? You know, is it worth it? You know, is the juice worth the squeeze or whatever the heck that term is? And that's what we've become in media now, is just boring, you know, talking heads who say the same dumb stuff. And then every once in a while, they'll tell Desmond Howard to pick 4 teams that have no chance of making the playoff just so we can get a little bit of promotion for ESPN and game day. And he'll do it, and he'll get hammered for it. And 3 of those 4 teams already have losses. But that's all kind of, it's scripted, it's fabricated.
It's fabricated.
It's not legitimate. And
ESPN's whole thing is fabricated.
Legitimate media, it's hard to find now. That's why I like Barstool, because they're as close to, you know, real opinions as you're going to find. And they built an empire on this, but it took them 20 years. I mean, you know, Barstool's been around 20 years.
Oh, yeah, because he used to.
And now they've just broken through.
Papers.
Yeah, they've just broken through to being, like, over the last 4 or 5 years, broken through to being a big, big mainstream. And then they signed the deal with ESPN, and then ESPN cancels immediately because Portnoy says one thing. It's like, this is why you wanted Barstool.
Right.
Because of what Portnoy says. And then he says something, you get backlash, and then you just cancel the deal immediately. It's like, I don't know where we're headed in that direction, but I'm trying to keep it as legitimate, to my opinion, as possible. You know, and if it's something as dumb as a list of who's going to replace Brian Harsin, or what happened with Herm, or a power ranking that people freak out about, that's as good as you're going to get, I guess, in this world. And that's what I'm going to offer you. But I have learned a lesson. You know, I mean, the Quentin Griffith thing was very bad for a very long time for me, and I should have just never said it.
Dude, the insight today. Thank you for giving me tons of clips to be able to cut up for today.
Don't clip up the Griffith one-handed thing. Come on. I don't need, you know, even like Jamal Adams got on me about that. You know, like, he's got millions of followers, and he doesn't, I don't know if he knows Griffin. He wasn't being drafted. He was on the Jets at the time, and Griffin was the Seahawks. They weren't teammates, but he just told me I was a complete jerk, you know, in public on Twitter, and it just blew up. I don't need anybody thinking I'm taking a victory lap here. That's an example of something that just didn't need to be said, shouldn't have been said, was right, was completely accurate. And there's absolutely no way for me to ever say I was right.
Oh, you're definitely not going to be able to say you're right.
No, because then it's like, you're taking pride in the failure of somebody at the NFL level, and he lasted 4 years. How many years did you last in the NFL? And you suck, and you should die. And like, no. So I don't know. That's why I like the handle Freezing Cold Takes on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
I love that. I've made it a few times, you know, with my Patrick Mahomes ingenious, you know, reach of the draft. I love that. And he's got a book too. I mean, I got the book right here. It's Fred Siegel. He's a lawyer down in Florida. He's a big Gators fan. I love that because it calls out everybody for their stupid takes. And then you see who's going to get in there and get defensive about it. And those that are just going to say, wow, that was really stupid of me to say. So I follow that Twitter account religiously.
That's funny. Well, let's close it out with the promo.
Yeah.
I got a bunch I have to do this week. I mean, I'm.
You know, you sent me that list over, and I love it, but I know it says status Dave. How do I add? Oh, status Mike just shows. Yeah, that shows what you did with me. It doesn't. Is there a place I can add my status, whether I've done it or not?
Yeah. You can just, all you do is fill it out. So it says.
Okay, so just add a column.
Well, I think you have. Do you have a column?
I don't. You didn't give me a column.
Let me. Okay, well, let me see.
Status Mike is whether you. Well, I guess status Mike is.
Yeah, so status Mike is the same as mine, right?
But
so
it's
then
not.
you can put how many you did.
Like
you could do how many you did.
Yeah. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If right now I just.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I got to go in there and change that. So like
Ramaka, change it all right.
I got to put in that I got 4 left for my. Okay, good. That'll help me keep track because I got a ton to do this week as well.
Because there's so many in there now that I'm like, whoa.
It's just hard to keep track of. And we got a few more last week, and the Farrell promo Twitter feed is being followed a lot more now. So I think, I thought the season would bring the deluge, and it's brought a steady trickle. I'm curious to see what's going to happen at the end of the season. And then the portal, which we're going to be promoting portal kids as well. They enforce that rule where you can only enter after the championship games. So there's a 45-day window between December and January where kids can enter. So you're going to have like about 1,500 to 2,000 kids in the portal in those 45 days. It's going to be nuts. And so I'm going to be following that with the Farrell portal thing, but that's going to be
a promo thing for that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's so many kids that are going to jump in there. If you jump in September, you can get a feel over the next few months as to whether there's interest or not. So then you can decide whether to jump out. But if you got to wait until December and you got 45 days, you might jump in and nobody's interested. And then you're just like, whoa. Like at least in September, you get that feeler over the next few months. The NCAA changed this rule, and now a lot of kids are going to be just sort of stuck. Like I went in the portal, I lost my scholarship. What do I do? And that's where we're going to come in.
That's exactly right. Go to myfootballcamps.com/D1. Awesome session today. I'll be sure not to cut up some of the clips that Mike doesn't want, but I'll cut up the ones he definitely does. And we'll put those out there. The clips are starting. As I thought, I had a follow. I said, you know what? I got to follow more of the Joe Rogan philosophy of this. Get the clips cut up. That's what people want to watch. They don't want to listen to us rant for an hour.
No, right? Nobody wants that. But you know what you didn't do? You didn't send me the audio. You didn't send me the video. And I know I shouldn't be complaining because you do all the work here. All I do is sit here in front of the computer and give you horrible stories of my past. But send me those clips too, bro. I retweeted them.
Okay.
Text them to me or email them to me, and I'll put them out there too, because I think they were very interested. You talked about, what a viral video is and why, people should be recruiting quarterbacks not named Arch Manning. Those I think were very intriguing. So that increased sort of the listenership.
Yeah, you know what? Because what I started doing is YouTube and TikTok, and I created a playlist called Legends Live Clips or whatever on my YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm dumping all the clips in there. So now anyone who wants to go, so I'll start to promote that as we get like a healthy amount of them in there.
Yeah.
And now people can just go there, right? They'll get that playlist link. They don't have to go through all of my YouTube or your YouTube. They can go right to the playlist. So that's what I think will be on TikTok. It's picking up. So the algorithm is starting to pick up on it because I don't know, but that algorithm, like, let's say I post about Marshallek, right? And it wants me to post more about, all the stuff I've always posted about, which is Marshallek or players, right? And then I throw in a clip of us. The first few of them don't pick up that well because they're like, wait, what is this? You know what I'm saying? Why are you throwing this monkey wrench in here? And then now they're starting to get more traction. So like I see 300, 400, 500, the views are starting to climb up. So what I'm trying to do is do one clip, one of my videos on the kid or whatever, you know what I'm saying? One clip. So that way the algorithm reads it better.
Yeah, and it's always changing, and I'm really bad at promotion. And that's what the problem is. I'll spend like an hour doing a podcast, or I'll spend a good half hour writing an article, and then what I'll do is I get lazy, and I'll hit the little social media feed like share button, rather than type out what I want to say. So it auto populates. So right now I got my top true freshman for week 3 on my site. I click the little Twitter button that says top true freshman for week 3 with a link, and I'll tweet that. Instead, I should be saying, hey, Penn State fans will be interested to see that because they have 2 running backs on this list and not just 1. And that makes people interested. And I'm just so lazy in that respect. I'm a horrible, horrible marketer. Awful. So anything you can do to help that on your side with the clips, I appreciate greatly.
Yeah.
And people should listen to this stuff. This is interesting, I think. I mean, what was the secret I told the other day? I forget it was. A couple of weeks ago, I gave you some secret about some parent. Did I tell you about Phil Sims trying to accost me in the parking lot at the Army Bowl?
Yeah, I think you did. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of neat stuff. The parent that showed up in my hotel room at the Army Bowl, the people throwing DVDs at my head. Like, I got a billion stories from the road, and I've just barely scratched the surface of it. I also need an author and a publisher. Have you ever written a book?
I just finished one, actually. I haven't published it yet. I finished one. It's ready to go. I have a publishing house for you for independent authors if you want one.
And you got my analytics last week. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to sort of figure out. I'm the click master, you know, not that my analytics are great, but I'm the one who can get people to want to kill me and be viral. But I have no business sense whatsoever because I haven't had to. I haven't had to for 24 years.
You're the martyr.
I don't need business savvy. You have the business savvy. You look at my platform and say, this is how we can make money, Mike, and here's your percentage.
That's right. That's fair.
So
all right, well, let's go check out myfootballcamps.com/D1. We'll see everybody next week. Check out the clips will be coming soon.
All right. See ya.
All right. Bye. All right.